Welcome to Vibrations and Manifestations, Season 2, Episode 113. We are so glad you're here for this deep dive into what we're calling initiation fatigue.
I'm Jared.
And I'm Alicia. And man, I feel like I need this one today.
Oh, I know you do. I mean, we both do, really.
Yeah, well, I was just telling you before we hit record about my weekend, I had this brilliant idea that I was going to completely overhaul my garage, meal prep for the entire month, and finally read that massive biography that's been on my nightstand forever.
All in 2 days.
All in 48 hours. And, Saturday morning I was riding high, I had the coffee flowing, I bought all these plastic bins. But by Sunday at 3 p.m., I was literally lying face down on the living room rug, just staring at a dust bunny.
Completely paralyzed.
Completely. I couldn't even order takeout. I just laid there feeling so guilty, thinking, why am I like this? Why can't I just optimize my weekend?
Right, the classic optimization trap.
Exactly. And that is exactly what we were getting into today, because personal growth, right? It's supposed to be freeing.
Yeah.
You do the shadow work, you heal your inner child, you organize your garage.
The holy trinity of healing.
Right. And you're supposed to feel lighter. But what happens when the constant, unrelenting pressure to learn and heal and adapt just becomes completely exhausting?
It gets so heavy. And society tells us that if we feel exhausted by growth, it just means we lack discipline. Like, oh, you just need to push harder.
Just drink more green juice.
Right. But today, we're going to break down why that exhaustion is not a sign of failure. It is actually a biological signal. It's a phenomenon called initiation fatigue. And if you've been feeling burnt out by your own self-improvement journey, we want to help you understand why your nervous system literally requires time to integrate change.
I mean, we're pulling from our own lives here, obviously, but also drawing on so much wisdom from, neuroscience, psychology, history. We're talking Norman Deutsch, Robert Sapolsky, Carl Jung, even Charles Darwin.
Yes, the Darwin stuff is so fascinating.
It really is. But before we get to the barnacles, and we will get to the barnacles, I want to talk about this modern obsession we have with constantly upgrading ourselves. It's like we treat ourselves like smartphones.
Oh, that's a perfect way to look at it.
Right. Like this whole idea of living in beta. In the tech world, living in beta means the software is never finished. It's always open to feedback, always updating.
Which sounds great on paper.
Sure. But think about what actually happens to your phone when you download a new operating system. You don't just tap a button and instantly have a better phone.
No, it essentially bricks your phone for 30 minutes.
Exactly. The screen goes black, the Apple logo just sits there, and the phone physically gets hot to the touch because the processor it's working in absolute overdrive to rewrite millions of lines of code.
Right. It drains a massive amount of battery.
Huge amount. And during that time, you can't make a call. You can't send a text. You can't take a photo. You just have to let it sit there. But with our own lives, we're constantly downloading these new habits and identities, and we expect to just remain fully operational while the rewiring is happening.
Yeah, we expect zero downtime. But human transformation doesn't work that way. I mean, living in beta has this massive shadow side, because constant updating requires extreme metabolic and emotional resources. Healing is biologically expensive.
Biologically expensive. I love that phrasing.
It's true. We think of the brain as a digital hard drive. You just drag and drop a new belief system into a folder. But it's an organ. It consumes 20% of your body's energy.
Wait, really? Just sitting around?
Just baseline. When you're running your normal routines, your brain relies on the basal ganglia. That's the autopilot part. It's super energy efficient. You don't have to think about how to tie your shoes.
Or driving to work and not remembering the drive?
Exactly. But when you decide to overhaul your life, you pivot your career or start a huge healing journey, you can't use the basal ganglia anymore. You are forcing the prefrontal cortex to take the wheel. And that part of the brain is an absolute energy hog.
So it's literally burning more fuel.
Oh, burning through glucose at an astonishing rate.
Yeah.
To wire a new habit, your brain has to synthesize new proteins. It has to thicken the myelin sheath around new neural pathways. It's physical construction.
Which perfectly explains the garage incident.
Yeah, you overdrafted your biological bank account.
Yeah.
And that is the core definition of initiation fatigue. It's that very specific exhaustion that hits when life asks you to evolve repeatedly in a really short window.
Like getting a new job, moving to a new city, and trying to start meditating all in the same month?
Yes. And at first it feels amazing. You get this huge surge of dopamine and adrenaline.
Oh, the honeymoon phase of personal growth. You feel untouchable.
Right. You think you have unlimited energy. But eventually the nervous system demands a pause. It steps in and says, look, I cannot process any more novel stimuli right now. We need to catch up.
But see, this is where the cultural guilt comes in, because society tells us that if we hit that wall, if we feel that fatigue, we're just lacking discipline. Like, how do we know the difference between genuine initiation fatigue and just, normal procrastination?
That's such an important distinction. Procrastination is almost always about avoiding the initiation itself. You never actually start the workout. You never send the hard email. And it feels like this restless, anxious, buzzing energy.
Like scrolling on your phone when you know you should be working?
Exactly. It's an anxious avoidance. Initiation fatigue happens after you've already taken the action. You sent the email, you started the routine, and the fatigue that follows isn't buzzing anxiety. It's a deep somatic heaviness, like your limbs feel like lead.
Your brain just feels thick.
Right. That heaviness is your body forcefully taking energy away from your external output and redirecting it inward for structural repair.
Wow. Okay, so it's not me being lazy, it's my body doing construction.
Precisely. And if we look at history, true evolution has always required this massive period of consolidation.
Yeah.
I mean, you brought up Darwin earlier.
Yes. Okay, we have to talk about Charles Darwin, because his life is basically the ultimate case study in not rushing the process. We have this whole myth about the eureka moment, right? We think Darwin went to the Galapagos, looked at some finch beaks, slapped his forehead, yelled eureka, and then changed the world overnight.
The apple falling on the head kind of myth.
Exactly. But the historical reality is wild. He formulated the core idea of natural selection in the late 1830s. He knew he had a world-changing truth. But he didn't publish on the origin of species until 1859, over 20 years later.
20 years of just sitting on the biggest scientific breakthrough in human history.
Can you imagine doing that today? If someone sat on an idea for 2 decades now, we'd diagnose them with imposter syndrome. We'd say they're losing their competitive edge. But biologically, he was doing exactly what your nervous system wants to do. He was consolidating.
And what was he actually doing during those 20 years? Because he wasn't just, like, napping.
No. Okay, so for 8 of those years, 8 years, he exclusively studied barnacles.
Wait, barnacles?
Literally crusty little barnacles. He was dissecting them, classifying them, writing letters to people all over the world asking for barnacle specimens. He had this massive revolutionary theory of evolution, and he spent a decade stress testing it against the most boring, mundane creatures he could find.
That is incredible. He was letting the idea mature.
He was letting the concrete cure. If you're building a skyscraper, you can't just pour the foundation and instantly start framing the 80th floor. The chemical bonds in the concrete actually need time to harden. If you build too fast, the whole thing collapses. Darwin was curing his intellectual concrete.
Which is such a perfect analogy for personal transformation.
Yeah.
When you have a massive paradigm shift, like you realize in therapy that your boundary issues come from childhood, that is your 1838 Darwin moment.
Right, you get the insight.
But if you immediately try to tear down your entire life and build a new one the very next day, you are building on wet concrete.
But here's the pushback, right? It's super easy for Charles Darwin to take 20 years. He lived on a Victorian estate. He had independent wealth. He didn't have a LinkedIn feed showing him all his peers, like getting promotions and starting podcasts. How on earth do we map a 20-year consolidation period to the fast-paced expectations of our modern lives?
Well, obviously we aren't saying every realization takes 20 years of isolation. The time frame scales to the change. But the sequence, the biological sequence of massive expansion followed by deep, quiet consolidation, that is a law of nature. You can't bypass it. You can speed up your environment, but you can't speed up your internal biology.
Yeah, and I learned that the hard way. I mean, talking about forced expansion, I feel like I have to share my own catastrophic failure here.
Oh, please do. Real-life examples are the best way to understand this. What happened?
Okay, so a few years ago, I hit this wall where I just felt stagnant, career-wise, health-wise, everything. And operating purely on, toxic hustle culture logic, I decided I was going to initiate version 2.0 immediately. Overnight, in the span of a single month, I tried to pivot my career into a completely new creative field. I simultaneously dropped my normal diet and went strict 100% raw vegan.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and if that wasn't enough, I decided to start doing high-intensity interval training 6 days a week at 5 a.m.
I mean, sorry, I know we're just talking here, but that is literally triggering a massive stress response across every system in your body at the same time.
It was so dumb, but here's the insidious part. For the first 2 weeks, I felt like an absolute superhero.
Oh, of course you did. The dopamine was flowing.
It was. I was waking up before my alarm, drinking these terrible green smoothies, doing burpees in the dark. I actually remember looking in the mirror and thinking, why hasn't everyone figured this out? You just have to decide to be great.
The ego was just feasting.
Feasting. But around week 4, it wasn't a gradual fade. It was like running full speed into a brick wall. I woke up one Tuesday and my body just refused to move. My arms felt like wet sand. The brain fog was so dense I couldn't even read an email. And my emotions. I dropped a spoon on the kitchen floor and literally started sobbing.
Total systemic collapse.
Total collapse. And my internal monologue was so mean, I kept telling myself I was weak, that I just lacked discipline. But looking back, what was my body actually trying to do when it shut me down like that?
It was literally saving your life.
Hmm?
Let's break down the mechanics of that crash, because it perfectly illustrates what happens when you skip integration. Start with the raw vegan diet. When you change your diet overnight, the bacteria in your gut microbiome that thrive on your old food are suddenly starved. They die off in mass quantities.
Oh, wow.
And when they die, they release endotoxins into your bloodstream. Your immune system registers that as a systemic infection and creates massive inflammation to fight it. That is where your brain fog and lethargy came from.
So my immune system thought I was sick because I was trying to be healthy too fast.
Exactly. And at the exact same time, you are doing workouts 6 days a week, creating micro tears in your muscle fibers. Muscle growth doesn't happen while you lift. It happens during rest when the body synthesizes protein to repair the tears. But you never rested. You just accumulated tissue damage.
No wonder I felt like wet sand.
Right. And because your immune system is fighting the gut die-off and your muscles are damaged, your brain looks at the energy budget and says, we do not have the glucose to spend on a creative career pivot right now. We have to keep the organs functioning. So it actively downregulated your prefrontal cortex.
So the crash wasn't a failure of willpower. It was my biology enforcing the rest I refused to take.
Exactly. It was enforcing the natural cycle of transformation. And this cycle is non-negotiable. It had 4 distinct phases, and you tried to skip the last 2 entirely.
Let's talk about those 4 phases, because if I had known this existed, I would have saved myself so much misery.
So the 4-phase cycle of sustainable transformation. Phase 1 is initiation.
Right, spark.
Yes, it's the moment an opportunity or insight appears. Maybe you decide to change careers or you get laid off. The defining characteristic is agency. You are standing at the threshold.
And then comes phase 2, which is expansion.
Expansion is the accelerated growth phase. This is what we're all addicted to. You're learning the new software, you're going on the dates, you're waking up early, your world gets larger. High energy expenditure, high novelty.
And this is where society tells us to just set up camp and live forever. Like, just keep expanding, stay on the grind. But biologically, you have to move to phase 3.
Phase 3 is integration, the quiet phase. This is when the nervous system processes the profound shock of the expansion. The brain actually prunes old synaptic connections that you don't need anymore and reinforces the new ones. It looks completely unproductive from the outside.
It's the barnacle phase.
Yes, the barnacle phase. And if you allow integration to run its course, it naturally gives way to phase 4, stabilization.
The new normal.
Exactly. The new identity doesn't feel foreign anymore. You don't have to force the habit. It's handed over to the basal ganglia.
Yeah.
Your energy is replenished, and you are resting on a newly established baseline.
I have this analogy I use for this that makes so much sense to me. It's like bone remodeling. You know how our bones aren't just dead calcium? They are living tissue that constantly destroys and rebuilds itself.
Right, with the different cells.
Yeah, you have osteoclasts, which break down the old bone tissue, and osteoblasts, which come in and build new bone tissue. Expansion is the osteoclasts. It breaks down the old structure and creates these microfractures. Integration is the osteoblasts coming in, laying down new minerals and making the bone denser and stronger.
That is such a vivid way to see it.
But if you constantly stay in the expansion phase like I did, you're just hyperactivating the osteoclasts. You're just breaking down bone over and over without letting it rebuild. You don't get a stronger skeleton, you get psychological osteoporosis. Your bones just snap under the slightest pressure.
And we see that everywhere. People are emotionally snapping because they refuse to stabilize.
But why are we so terrified of the stabilization phase? Why does it feel so much like failure?
Because we live in a society that measures your worth by visible, constant output. If you aren't demonstrably scaling up, if you aren't posting about a milestone, the narrative is that you are falling behind. We've conflated motion with progress, but motion without stabilization is just degradation.
And the hard science backs this up completely. Let's dive into the science and the soul of integration, starting with the neuroscience. I mean, Norman Doidge's work on neuroplasticity is huge here.
Absolutely. Deutsch really popularized the idea that the adult brain isn't static, it's plastic. It can physically rewire itself in response to learning or experience.
Which is great news. We aren't doomed by our past.
It is great news. But neuroplasticity is a grueling physical construction project. To learn a new pattern, your brain sprouts new synaptic connections and dissolves old ones. And that requires massive metabolic energy, and crucially, it requires deep sleep.
Because the brain literally washes itself while we sleep, right?
Yes, the glymphatic system opens up during deep sleep and washes cerebrospinal fluid through the brain, clearing out all the metabolic waste you generated during the expansion phase. If you don't pause and rest, that waste builds up, synapses can't form correctly, and neuroplasticity just halts.
Wow. And then you add in Robert Sapolsky's work on stress.
Sapolsky's a neuroendocrinologist, and his core insight is that the human stress response was designed for acute, short-term crises, like a zebra running from a lion.
Right. The zebra either gets away or it gets eaten. If it gets away, it just goes right back to grazing.
The stress cycle completes, the nervous system settles. But humans, we generate that exact same physiological stress response just by thinking about a career pivot or a new diet. Continuous change, even positive change, demands constant adaptation.
And the brain registers adaptation as a stressor.
Exactly. It creates an allostatic load chronic wear and tear. If you don't enter the integration phase, you endure a chronic drip of cortisol. And chronic cortisol is toxic. It suppresses the immune system, halts digestion, and it literally shrinks the hippocampus. It's the part of your brain responsible for learning.
Which ties perfectly into Peter Levine's somatic work. He talks about pendulation, right? The nervous system has to swing out into activation, but it must swing back into settling.
Settling is not optional. If you don't allow time to discharge that massive energy from a life change, it gets trapped in the body as chronic anxiety, hypervigilance, and eventually that deep somatic exhaustion.
It's undeniable biologically. But what's so cool is how this science perfectly mirrors ancient spiritual and psychological wisdom, like Carl Jung's concept of individuation.
Oh, Jung is a perfect example. Confronting your shadow and uncovering deep truths is deeply destabilizing. It's pure expansion. But you can't just stare at the shadow and become whole. You have to synthesize that truth into your identity, which takes immense patience and solitude.
You see it in vision quests in indigenous cultures, too. You don't just have a vision and instantly lead the tribe. There's a ceremonial period of reintegration, or monastic silence, or even just agriculture letting a field lie fallow so the soil can regenerate.
It's everywhere. Eckhart Tolle talks about how true transformation only happens in the present moment. If you're always obsessing over the next phase of growth, you are abandoning the now, which is the only place integration can actually happen.
And Neville Goddard, his whole manifestation philosophy is about living from the wish fulfilled.
Yes, which is fundamentally a practice of nervous system stabilization. You don't frantically force the universe. You assume the feeling of having already achieved the goal. And what does that feel like? It feels like relief. It feels calm.
You're telling your brain, the work is done, we can rest.
Exactly. You are forcing the integration phase.
Okay, so the biology, the psychology, the spirituality, they all say the same thing. You have to let the concrete cure. But here is the friction. As modern people, we always want a biohack. If neuroplasticity requires so much energy, is there a way to hack the process? Can I take a nootropic or do some specific breath work to make integration happen faster?
It's the most predictable modern question. How can I optimize my rest so I can grind faster?
I'll schedule exactly 6 minutes of high-intensity integration between my Zoom calls.
The biological reality is no. You cannot hack the speed of neural consolidation. It is governed by hardwired circadian rhythms and the natural half-life of stress hormones. You can't force a tree to grow faster by pulling upward on its branches. You'll just uproot it.
So we just have to be patient.
Well, you can't speed up the clock, but you can optimize the environment for integration. You can stop doing things that actively impede the settling process. You facilitate it instead of forcing it.
Which brings us perfectly to the tactical part of this deep dive. How do we actually do this? We've distilled all this into 4 practical tools for tactical integration.
Let's break them down. Tool number 1, the integration inventory.
I love this one. How does it work?
So, when you're stuck in the mindset of constant improvement, your brain is exclusively scanning for the gap between where you are and where you want to be. The inventory forces you to look backward. You sit down with a journal and write out 3 specific changes that have already taken root in your life over the last 6 months.
So not goals, established facts.
Right. cataloging what is already stabilized. Like 6 months ago, I started setting a boundary around my work email after 7 p.m. Used to cause me anxiety to ignore my phone. Now I do it automatically.
I like the warehouse analogy for this. Imagine your life is a massive warehouse. The initiation and expansion phases are like ordering new inventory. Boxes are arriving on the loading docks constantly, new habits, relationships, goals. But you can't keep ordering new inventory if the warehouse floor is completely blocked. You have to unpack the boxes and put them on the shelves.
Yes, exactly.
The integration inventory is just walking through the warehouse with a clipboard and saying, look at all this stuff we've already successfully shelved. We don't need to order anything else right now. We are fully stocked.
And that cognitive recognition triggers dopamine, not from novelty, but from the satisfaction of completion. It signals safety to the nervous system.
But let me ask you this. What if someone's recent changes weren't consensual? What if they were forced into expansion by a layoff or a divorce or a health crisis? Looking back at the last 6 months might just be a landscape of pain. How do you inventory that without spiraling?
That is a crucial distinction. If the change was non-consensual, the inventory is not about celebrating the event itself. It's about inventorying your biological and psychological adaptation. You are cataloging your resilience.
Right.
So it might look like, 1, I survived the initial shock without completely breaking down. 2, I managed to update my resume while processing deep grief. You are acknowledging to your nervous system, we have done immense, exhausting work to survive this, and we deserve to rest now.
Reclaiming the narrative of survival, that is so powerful. Okay, tool number 2, stabilizing rituals.
When you are at a period of high change, your primitive brain is scanning for threats. Novelty registers as danger. Stabilizing rituals are deliberate anchors you place in your routine to signal predictability and safety.
What's the difference between a stabilizing ritual and just like a boring routine?
Intentionality. It's simple, highly predictable, and entirely within your control. It could be making your pour-over coffee using the exact same steps in the exact same mug at 7 a.m. every single day, or a 15-minute walk around the same block at twilight.
The content doesn't matter, just the predictability.
Precisely. You are offloading cognitive effort back to the basal ganglia, giving your prefrontal cortex a vacation. It tells your body, yes, our career is up in the air, but the coffee tastes exactly the same, so we are not in mortal danger.
It's like having one calm cabin deep in the hull of a ship during a massive storm. You go there to remember what normal feels like. All right, tool number 3, the weekly integration question.
We usually end our weeks with a harsh performance review, right? What did I fail to accomplish? What needs aggressive improvement? We need to replace that punitive interrogation. The new question is, what change in my life needs time to settle?
What needs time to settle? Just hearing that drops my shoulders.
It changes your orientation from acceleration to consolidation. You might realize, I started a new physical therapy routine 3 weeks ago, and I'm exhausted. I'm not adding a networking goal this week. I'm just letting the physical therapy become my baseline.
It prevents those overlapping expansions. And tool number 4, the permission pause.
This is for when the anxiety of not doing enough randomly spikes. You see a competitor's post, your chest tightens. The permission pause is a mantra. You place your hand on your chest and say, integration is happening.
Integration is happening.
You are reframing the sensation of stagnation into a recognition of biological labor. You're reminding your brain that the heaviness isn't laziness, it is synaptic pruning. Words matter deeply to the autonomic nervous system.
Now, these 4 tools are incredibly effective, but there is this insidious subconscious belief system that can override all of it. We call this manifestation debug mode. Because you can do your rituals perfectly, but if this background program is running, you'll stay stressed.
We have to examine the core belief creating the pressure. And the most toxic cultural mandate we carry is, if I am not constantly improving, I am falling behind.
The ultimate capitalist metric applied to the human soul. If your graph isn't pointing up and to the right, you're failing.
And psychologically, it's devastating. It forces your mind into perpetual hypervigilance. You become a hostile auditor of your own life, constantly scanning for flaws. And that translates into physical stress.
Oh, you feel it. It's that shallow chest breathing, the jaw clenching, the burning tension in your shoulders that no massage can fix.
Because it's not a muscular problem, it's a nervous system problem. Your brain thinks a predator is chasing you, but the predator is just your own impossible standard.
So how do we debug this?
Esther Hicks and the Law of Attraction framework give us a great lens here. They emphasize alignment over effort. Pure effort, white-knuckling your way to a goal, creates massive internal resistance and signals lack. Alignment requires easing up. We need to replace that old belief with a structurally sound one.
What's the new code?
The reframe is, I allow growth to stabilize before seeking the next expansion.
I allow growth to stabilize. If you're listening right now, try saying that in your mind. I allow growth to stabilize. Notice what happens physically. Your stomach unclenches. Your breath drops into your diaphragm. It's like taking off a heavy backpack.
That physical relief is your autonomic nervous system shifting from sympathetic fight or flight to parasympathetic rest and digest. And that is the only state where deep healing and neuroplastic rewiring can occur.
But I have to play devil's advocate for a second. Saying, I allow growth to stabilize feels great right now. But tomorrow morning when I open my email or scroll social media and see someone younger than me crushing it, that urgency comes roaring back. How do we protect this mindset in a hyper-competitive world?
You have to redefine what a competitive advantage actually is. In hustle culture, everyone is burning out. They're building spectacular houses of cards on structurally unsound foundations. The true long-term advantage belongs to the person with the discipline to stop and stabilize. When their next expansion arrives, they launch from a bedrock foundation. They won't crash. Integration isn't a weakness, it is structural integrity.
Integration is structural integrity. I love that. Okay, to really cement this, we want to move into a space of active reflection. We've developed 4 gentle prompts based on everything we've discussed. You don't need to write an essay, just let these percolate.
Prompt 1. Where have I experienced rapid change recently? And remember, look for the invisible shifts too. Did you quietly stop a toxic dynamic with a parent? Did you change a core political view? Acknowledge the invisible labor.
Prompt 2. What growth still needs time to integrate? This is about the lag between external reality and internal identity. Like, you got the promotion, so the external expansion is done. But internally, you have imposter syndrome and you're exhausted. That area is screaming for stabilization.
Prompt 3. What would rest look like without guilt? And this one is so hard for high achievers.
It really is. Why is resting without guilt nearly impossible for us? How do we bypass the ego's need to constantly produce?
High achievers conflate their inherent worth with their visible output. The ego builds an identity around being the one who gets things done. So if you aren't producing, the ego feels an existential threat. Guilt is just the alarm system trying to force you back into production. You can't just fight the guilt. You have to reframe the utility of the rest.
She's the ego's language.
Exactly. Give rest a vital job description. Tell your ego, I'm actively synthesizing my gains so we don't experience systemic collapse.
Prompt 4. How can I support my nervous system while evolving? Find tiny pockets of regulation. 3 deep breaths before opening your laptop. Protecting your Sunday mornings. Just micro-environments of safety.
And now we want to drop these concepts out of the intellect and into the body. We're going to guide you through a sensory visualization to help your nervous system shift in real time.
If you are driving, please keep your eyes on the road and just listen. If you are somewhere safe, soften your gaze or close your eyes. We are going to construct a mental model of the integration phase.
We call this the integration garden. Start by taking a slow, deliberate breath in through your nose, letting your stomach expand. And release it through your mouth with a soft sigh. Slowing your breath manually overrides the vagus nerve, signaling to your brain that right now there is no threat.
Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a small enclosed garden. The air is incredibly cool and fresh. A massive torrential rainstorm has just passed through.
That storm represents your recent phases of initiation and expansion. The rapid changes, the hard decisions. The storm was violent, but it delivered vital water. Now the storm is over. The clouds are parting.
Look down at the soil at your feet. It's dark, heavy, completely saturated. The plants here represent the different facets of your life: relationships, career, habits.
Notice what is not happening. The water isn't rushing away. It is slowly, patiently seeping down into the dark earth. This slow seeping is integration. The soil is your nervous system, absorbing the shock.
Look at the plants. They aren't straining upward to grow taller right now. All the vital activity is happening invisibly beneath the surface. The roots are drinking, expanding laterally, fortifying their grip to support future growth.
Mentally map the steadiness of this garden onto your own body. Imagine that unhurried rhythm moving into your chest. Feel the ancient trust that nature holds. It knows dormancy is just as important as blooming. You survived the storm. The water is here. Grant yourself permission to simply absorb it.
Take one more deep breath, smelling the wet earth. And as you exhale, lock that unshakable stability into your muscles. And whenever you are ready, gently bring your awareness back to the room. That imagery hits really hard because there is a profound paradox there. To the naked eye, a seed doing absolutely nothing looks identical to a seed doing the hardest, most vital work of its entire existence, putting down roots.
Exactly.
Stagnation and integration look exactly the same from the outside, but structurally they are opposites. Stagnation is the process of decay. Integration is the unseen engineering of a foundation capable of supporting the next massive leap.
And that is exactly why we feel that crushing guilt when we rest. We judge ourselves by the visible surface. We think we are stagnating, when in reality our nervous system is doing the vital work of rooting.
Let's step back and look at the whole landscape we've mapped out today, because it is a total paradigm shift for anyone listening.
It really changes everything.
We started by asking why our relentless pursuit of personal evolution leaves us so depleted. And the answer is that human growth is not a rocket ship. It is a rhythm.
An undeniable biological and psychological rhythm. Initiation, expansion, integration, and stabilization.
Right. We saw how Charles Darwin utilized that rhythm, spending years meticulously studying barnacles just to consolidate a theory that would change the world.
The integration phase.
And we looked at the mechanics of neuroplasticity, revealing that rewiring your identity physically drains your metabolic battery and spikes stress hormones if you refuse to rest.
The biology demands a pause.
And finally, we built a workshop of practical tools. Taking that integration inventory, utilizing stabilizing rituals, asking the weekly question, and initiating the permission pause to prove that expansion simply cannot survive without integration.
So if you are listening to this right now and feeling a deep, profound sense of exhaustion, please recognize that it is not a failure of willpower.
No, it's not.
It is not a sign that the changes you've made aren't working. It is your brilliant, highly evolved biology asking for the space to make those upgrades permanent.
Which leaves us with a critical question about how we move forward from here. We live in a society that demands constant public performance. Every app, every platform, every networking event asks us for a status update on our lives. We measure our worth by visible, continuous output.
And it's exhausting.
So what happens to you when you step out of that spotlight to do the invisible work? How do you carve out the right to integrate in a culture that only rewards the bloom and never the root?
That's the real challenge.
It is. Perhaps choosing to radically rest, to let your personal evolution remain invisible and entirely your own for a while, isn't just a biological necessity. It might be the most rebellious act of self-preservation you can make. So the next time I end up staring at my ceiling on a Sunday afternoon, I'm just going to remind myself, I'm not lazy, I'm just studying my barnacles.
I love that. Integration is happening.
Integration is happening.
So we have one simple directive for you this week. Choose one area of growth in your life that is already underway, just one. And your only job is to let it settle. Don't push it further, don't optimize it, just let the roots strengthen.
Grant yourself the permission to stabilize. Because once your identity stabilizes and your nervous system regulates, you unlock a completely new level of capability. You move out of reactive change and into intentional direction.
Which is the perfect setup for our next episode, where we'll talk about choosing your timeline. Once the foundation is secure, how do you decide what to build without burning out again?
It's gonna be phenomenal. But until then, we want to leave you with one final thought to chew on. Something to think about tomorrow morning when you're making your coffee. If you truly believe deep down in your bones that you didn't need any more fixing right now, what beautiful thing would you suddenly have the spare energy to simply enjoy? Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. Take a deep breath and let yourself rest.